Or can we start without her? Can you? All right. So it looks like we're live, and we'll have here call the roll.
Here. Here.
Excused.
Present.
I am here. So we have a quorum. We have a senator presenting another bill, so he should be popping in shortly, or else we'll leave the vote open for him. Welcome to the Senate Ag Committee. Today we will be taking up House Bill 152, Life is a Human Right Act. I'd like to set a few ground rules before we begin. As you know, all testimony comes through the chairman. We respect civility and decorum here, so please address us through the chairman and by our senator rank. And please be respectful of others as you testify. Please turn off your cell phones and put them on silent. And so with that, we will be cutting off testimony at 9 o'clock because we need time to work the bill, and we have caucus at 9:30 as the Senate. So we don't have a lot of time today. We'll be limiting testimony to 2 minutes. If you are online and you are testifying, when your 2 minutes are up, we will have to turn off your microphone so that we can keep the meeting running efficiently and smoothly and get to as much testimony as we can. With that, I would like to invite the representatives up to present their bill. And as you're testifying, please state your name and who you are with. We do have a list of for and against that we will be circulating. If you could sign in on that today, it will help us with procedure, and then we'll just go down that list and call you up as you signed in. With that, representatives, please explain your good bill. Whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Ag Committee. I'm Rachel Rodriguez-Williams with House District 50, and this morning I present to you House Bill 152, Life is a Human Right Act. And with your permission, I can go ahead and walk you through the bill. All right. So the question is why we're seeing this bill. I'd like to briefly explain the why and the what of the bill. Because life is so precious, it is important that the best law be passed by the legislature. And pro-life Wyomingites have sent us here to protect life, myself in particular. This legislature is taking the opportunity to provide a more fulsome statement of Wyoming's position on the protection of life with this piece of legislation. As the legislative branch responds to the actions of the judicial branch in a variety of settings every day and throughout our history, the history of our country, this body is doing the same thing. We'll go ahead and start by taking a look at page 2 through 4. And what you'll see on page 2 through 4 is findings and purpose, legislative findings. The body recognizes that because unborn babies are members of the human race from conception, they're entitled to the rights of all humans. The body recognizes that Wyoming has a legitimate interest in and duty to preserve the life of all humans, no matter what stage of life they're in. The body recognizes that this breach has the authority to interpret and define terms found within the Constitution. Moving on to page 5 and 6, we look at definitions. Abortion is defined as the intentional termination of the pregnancy of a woman. It's crucial to point out that this bill specifically states on the bottom of page 6 to the top of page 6 that abortion does not include measures intended to save the life of the baby, measures to remove a dead unborn baby, or treatments for ectopic pregnancies, which is not an abortion. Pregnancy, reasonable medical judgment, and unborn baby are also defined on page 6. Moving on to page 7. Under 356123, a Wyoming state statute, abortion is prohibited. Further down below, page 7, moving on to page 8, we further discuss the exceptions within this bill, specifically pre-viability separation procedures in order to prevent the death or serious permanent impairment of life-sustaining organs of the pregnant woman, treatments resulting in the accidental injury to or the death of an unborn baby. Mind you, contraceptives are not included in the definition of abortion and are not prohibited by House Bill 152. The intent of this bill is specifically focused on the destruction of innocent life. Moving on to page 9 through 10, we take a look at penalties. Penalties do not apply to a pregnant woman who is the victim of an abortion. Physicians or anyone who causes another to receive an abortion are guilty of a felony and a fine not to exceed $20,000. A physician may risk losing their license as well. Moving on to page 10 and 11, we look at civil remedies. This bill creates a private right of action for women who are victims of abortion, provides a route for enforcement by a county attorney or district attorney with proper jurisdiction. Moving on to page 12 and 13. We talk about construction and the right of intervention and severability with the bill. Page 12 specifies that the provisions of the act are severable. Page 12 through 13 creates a right of intervention to allow interested legislators to intervene in the event that it were taken to court. Rights of intervention are common in legislation of this kind and throughout our nation. Moving on to page 13, we look at jurisdiction and specifically under A, and we talk about the juvenile court having general jurisdiction in all matters and proceedings. Moving on to page 14 through 16, talk about record keeping. This bill requires the Office of Vital Statistics to compile data on abortions committed with the state. On page 16, there's protection for physicians who refuse to perform abortions, and under 17, a prohibition for state funds to be used to perform or abet in all abortions. And with that, Madam Chairman, I would stand for any questions and any interest to further describe the bill.
Thank you, Representative. And I see one of your drafters who has helped extensively with this bill has entered the room. If he'd like to come forward to the table as well, I would be glad to entertain that. All right. Are there any questions for Representative Rodriguez-Williams? Any questions? Seeing none. Representative Nyman, do you have a statement?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, and I just want to thank the committee for allowing us this opportunity to be able to share that. I think this very pertinent and invaluable piece of legislation going forward. All I would share quickly, I think the good representative that explained the bill done an excellent job, and I would only add that this bill we brought this bill to answer questions and to provide more clarity going forward in the current situation as we see faced with abortion in Wyoming because of the Dobbs decision and our ability as a state to now be able to make determinations. That is the purpose behind this particular piece of legislation. And so that's why we would very much appreciate your thoughtful consideration on this, because this going forward is a necessary piece of legislation to be able to establish that abortion is not health care, that it establishes personhood. It establishes many things that we do not currently have in the trigger bill, which is currently before the court system and will not be determined or seen until December the 2nd. So that is, to me, why this particular piece of legislation is so critical that it move forward in the process, because there are questions that are answered in this legislation that desperately need to be able to be answered for the protection and preservation of life in our state. So, and I would be glad to stand for any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Senator Cole.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative Nyman, on page 13, lines 5 to 16, where it really talks about have the ability to intervene. How would that work? How can we tell the courts, force the courts to say that you have the right to intervene? I thought it was a court decision. Could you please explain the logic behind that? Thank you.
Go ahead, Representative.
Madam Chairman, Senator Cole, thank you for the question. The reason behind the intervention, and there's a couple other folks here that could also expound on this. The reason for the intervention was to be able to bring information to the current litigation and to be able to offer more information. The reasoning behind our intervention and the desire to be able to do that was to supplant, or not to supplant, but to support already pending legislation, and would allow more information than we had to be able to support the position of the state and support of them. Because of our ability to be able to bring the thoughts and the views of our constituents, the folks that have stakeholders in this, we believe that it was an important part of intervention. And there are court cases and currently that have been, would give example, and I'll let them give you the specific example of interventions of where legislatures have been offered the opportunity to be able to intervene on behalf of their constituents, not to try to supplant or to subvert the court, but to be able to offer more information and more dialogue and hopefully more clarity on those issues that are before the courts. And so, and maybe I would also ask that that question be posed to Mr. Harrison, because he can give a very direct answer of specific court cases where they've done that and in that situation. So.
Madam President or Chairman, if I can ask, but before we go to the other witness, what I'm really curious on this section is the way that's constructed, and I want to understand the legal nature of that. Is that what only that opportunity would exist, is if you have to come back and then get a joint resolution by the legislature, which means that it has to pass both parties by a majority vote, and so. The first question is why would you have to go back to the entire legislature, and why through the form of a joint resolution? Is there a legal basis for that? And then, so that's one question. What's the legal basis of have to go through a joint resolution? Number two, why would we even do that through a resolution?
Welcome, Mr. Harrison, and we're hoping you can answer that question for us.
Sure. One of the things that came up while we were drafting this, questions were posed by legislators in the House that, what happens if somebody dies? What if it happens that the law is challenged sometime in the future? So I drafted, and that's actually my language that I drafted, that we would have a joint resolution so that the legislature could appoint people. Now that can be changed. You could just say any legislator that was a member of the House or the Senate at the time could challenge the law. And I've seen it drafted that way in other states. So this is not a provision that is new for other states. Other states have done this. Congress does it regularly and appoints people like, somebody like the Sierra Club can have intervention rights. And there is a specific case, a United States Supreme Court case, Berger versus North Carolina. I can get you the site. It was a 2022 case in which North Carolina legislators were appointed by the legislature, and they were allowed in a United States Supreme Court case to intervene. So that's the reason it's been done that way. Now, the criticism on the House side and the Senate, of course, could have a different opinion on this, is that we didn't have specific people lined up to be representatives of the legislature, such as the sponsors of the bill. That's another way to approach it. You could have sponsors of the bill do it. I think intervention is appropriate, that the legislature has in the past appointed people like the Attorney General. In that Berger versus North Carolina case, the Supreme Court said, well, you can't always be sure if you're in the legislature that the Attorney General is going to be of your party or of your opinion. That's the even more important thing, or that the Attorney General is going to have the passion that legislators would have for the bill and find people to do it. Now, there's no cost to the legislature the way this is envisioned, because groups like Alliance Defending Freedom, which are right now representing the legislators, are anticipated to go forward and do it. I'm in the case that's up in Teton County right now. And this legislation was modeled based on problems that we saw with the trigger law that's presently in effect. And I can go into that if you want.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, so if I may, Mr. Harrison, it's not the ability to have legislators intervene that gives me pause. It's the mechanism through joint resolution, which takes a majority of vote. Wouldn't it have just been more simple to say any of the co-sponsors currently serving, or even in their capacity if they're no longer serving, were an original member of the bill? Versus having to go back through a joint resolution, because as you well know, some of the times these things are timely, and we only meet for 4 to 6 weeks on a yearly basis. So you may miss that opportunity to intervene, having to go back to the legislature, because there is no joint resolution now that accompanies this. And so it just looks like a very cumbersome mechanism to get to what you're trying to do, is to afford the ability of members of the legislature to participate as an intervener. And I'm just, it's the joint resolution component of this that seems like excessively cumbersome. And I don't know what's going to meet the intent. So again, is there some significant legal basis that you'll have to go back through the legislature versus what is the courts have currently done on this issue of allowing legislators to intervene?
Madam Chairman?
Go ahead.
Madam Chairman, Senator Hicks, I agree with you. I mean, I drafted it in response to what I was feeling as pushback on the House side, to have a provision in there for a joint resolution, so that the question came up, well, what happens in 20 years? These people are all going to be dead, or they're not going to be in the legislature. And my thought is that this legislation, if it's challenged, will be challenged right away. And that current members of the House, and it would be simpler to do it without a joint resolution. And that would be a very simple amendment that the Senate could bring. And I think that I would be happy to draft that if necessary, and provide it through you folks to LSO. I'm happy to do that, because I think you're right, and it would be much simpler not to have the joint resolution, which in this late in the session might not be doable. So that's
not doable.
Right. So I agree with you. I'm not
All right,
trying to argue that.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions? Senator French?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I see that there were a number of amendments that were offered. Looks like they all failed but one. Can you explain it's number that was offered by Representative Craigo, Lawley, Oakland, Stith? It's House Bill 0152H3002. Can you talk to me about that one?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator French, thank you for that question. Yeah, so the House did pass that amendment, and on the House side, as the sponsor of the bill, I deemed it an unfriendly amendment. Unfortunately, it did pass. I would be willing to talk further as to the necessity of your committee entertaining the idea of removing that amendment.
Follow up, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. And I guess, why do you view it as unfriendly and asking us, the committee, to remove that? Can you go a little deeper into that, please? Thank you.
Madam Chair, Senator French. So yeah, there was extensive rebuttal on my end as to why that's an unfriendly amendment. And I, again, would encourage removal of it. So House Bill 152 is clear. It's constitutional. It clears up all the questions that the pro-abortion side has brought up with previous legislation that's currently in court. And mind you, I have the most respect for my colleagues who did draft that amendment. However, it does work against the intent of the bill. The amendment eliminates the whole purpose of the bill, and it assures that we'll have abortions continue in Wyoming for the next 2 years at minimum, while the highest court of the land does get to the matter. With the pending legislation, we don't have a trial until December of 2023. And in plain terms, I guess I would say that if the amendment passes, abortions, again, will continue because it reverts back to the definition from the 1970s that we have on the books as to how abortion is defined within the state of Wyoming. What 152 does is it redefines abortion. It makes abortion not healthcare clearly. And again, maybe some of my colleagues would want to weigh in on that as well.
Madam Chairman.
Go ahead.
Senator Hicks, or excuse me, Senator French, I think that was the primary issue. Just to give you some background, this was an idea that was brought, and I actually had that idea and was thinking that would be a way of trying to maybe quell some of the concerns when we were thinking that, you've got one horse already in the race, and why would you want to, create another one, maybe let this one run and then see what happens. But the reality of it was, on further discussion, is that there are so many points in 152 that are unanswered in 92. The truth is 152 must replace 92 in order to answer those questions and to be able to establish that abortion is not health care, establish the personhood, establish multiple issues and the intervention, the severability, multiple points in this that need to be established that 92 doesn't. So that was the reasoning behind that. They believed that it was a way of, allowing both to run and see where it plays out. Truthfully, sir, 152 needs to replace 92 because it answers questions that 92 simply cannot and have been asked by the court, and they will not be able to be determined by that particular piece of legislation. That is why it is vital to pass this, to be able to allow it to replace that piece of legislation and answer those questions that are currently before the court.
All right, are you good? All right, any further questions? Yes, Mr. Harrison, if you had any further comments for us, and then we better get to public comment.
Okay, I just want to talk to you about that trigger amendment, Madam Chairman and Senator French. I think that's an excellent question as to why this amendment came forward. And there's some concept that this is some kind of a race between the trigger law and this law. And the trigger law, as I would point out to you, that's now in the courts and has been enjoined from the first day that it was in effect. We've made no progress. I'm in that case right now in the Supreme Court with the intervention of the legislators that I represent in that case. And there has been no progress in 7 months in that case whatsoever. So if we pass 152, we're going to start at the same point that we're in the original trigger law. We're not going to lose any time whatsoever. And in fact, I think, at least this is my opinion, and different lawyers will disagree with me. And of course, I can't predict what a court's going to do. But I think that 152 is in such a position that it answers the questions about such things as healthcare that are existent in HB 92 because it used the original definition of abortion from 1977. Because of that, there are all kinds of questions because abortions under that can be healthcare, such as ectopic pregnancies and that kind of thing. So I think that this legislation answers that question. It gives us an excellent chance not to have an injunction in the first place, and it will save us possibly 2 years. Now, even if I'm wrong, and the Supreme Court and the district court enjoin everything right now, we're still better off with HB 152 in front of the courts because I think we will have much more success in the end, and it will go quicker because the questions will be answered quicker. So that's my belief. having been involved in the litigation and also in the drafting of this legislation. Thank you.
All right, are we good? Are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Please stick around. When we're dealing with amendments, we might call you back up. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, so the way we're going to proceed with public testimony, we'll take care of everyone in the room first. Signed up on our sign-up sheets, we have 4 against and 6 for the bill. Online, we have 4 in favor and 6 opposed. So we have those numbers as a part of the record. If we don't get to some of the folks online, we want to be sensitive to the folks that braved the weather and the roads that are here. So with that, since we have more in favor than opposed, we'll start with those in favor. You will have 2 minutes, and Bill Winnie would be first. Welcome to the Ag Committee.
Madam Chairman, Bill Winnie. I'm from Sublette County. I support the bill. As I understand the common law of many years ago, it considered a woman and her embryo or fetus as one, and that was the long history. We've gone a long way since then. In the medical world, we've reached a point where a premature infant at 20 weeks can be whisked off to a neonatal intensive care unit, and somewhere else, a 20-week fetus that's being aborted is just disposed of. Like it or not, our courts are bureaucracies, and they deal with things sometimes when they're tough problems by defining them away. And so what faces you this morning, as I see it, is when does the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness attach to the embryo or fetus or newborn? Versus when does the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of the mother override that of the fetus? Now, clearly, in some cases, you have an ectopic pregnancy, the mother's life is clearly at risk. And the fetus is probably not going to be viable anyway. That's a separate case. So, as I understand it, let me say it a different way. I believe it is well within the purview of the legislature to express the sense of the state with regard to things like that, and perhaps even set the definition. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winnie. Any questions for Mr. Winnie? Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. The next person to testify would be Wendy Volk. If you could come down, please. Welcome to the Ag Committee. Thank you for braving the roads today. Go ahead and tell us who you are, who you're with, and your position on the bill.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and Steinmetz and Senators. My name is Wendy Volk. I live here in Cheyenne. I just wanted to speak in opposition. I can't sit by as a Republican, as a woman, as a mother of 2 daughters, to see something that's an ugly, messy bill. I think we're actually inserting the legislature in medical decisions for the Wyoming women. I don't want to see Wyoming women treated this way. I think it's very concerning to have a bill that goes such a government overreach. If we did something like this to the male citizens of Wyoming, I can't imagine. We're treating women and men's health differently. I also wanted to share with you, the CDC had a report on the youth risk behavior surveillance system. In Wyoming, sexual violence among teens is concerning, with 13.6% of females and 7.2% of males reporting that have been physically forced to have sexual intercourse. Additionally, 9% of the females and 3.7% of males have experienced sexual dating violence. You would never wish that upon any loved one or any Wyoming teenager. And I'm afraid what we're doing with this type of legislation is creating a rape culture. I think what's concerning is that the rape culture is characterized by sexism, and that involves normalized denigration and dismissal of women. Failure to address these conditions for young people of school age creates hurdles of their already encumbered path to personal and professional success and the possibility of public leadership, where the ranks of women leaders is proportionally smaller than they are for men, especially here in our state. So I would just like to follow up is, please, this is a very encumbered piece of legislation. I think it's going to get messier and messier. It's going to end up in court, just like what we have. So I would rather, let's turn this bill down. Especially, we don't want to turn Wyoming women and girls into sex slaves. We don't want to send our Wyoming women and teenagers the message that they are brood mares and they are brood mares only. Think about what you're saying is that the legislature can be making a better decision for these young people and women than they can make for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Volk. Any questions for Ms. Volk? All right, thank you for being here today. Next up, Mike Lehman. Welcome to the Ag Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mike Lehman, representing the Catholic Diocese of Cheyenne. I've been appealing to our legislators to work for the integrity of the state, to be consistent. Several years ago, the legislature fixed a loophole in the law. It used to be that if someone assaulted a pregnant mother and she and the baby died, that assailant could be charged with double homicide. But if mom lived and the baby died, the assailant could not be charged even with a single count of homicide. The legislature fixed that. And throughout statute, also, there are places where the state claims authority to take action, even against parents, when the state believes the best interest of a child is in danger. That's an important claim of authority on the part of the state. And unfortunately, because of the world we live in, the state needs to act in such cases as abuse and neglect. But what happens to the state's authority when in one instance, it claims to have authority to act in the best interest of a child, and in the next breath, it turns a blind eye to the intentional destruction of children? If being human and alive are not enough to qualify for the full legal protection of the state, what else is necessary? Who gets to decide, and based upon what premise? Should a child also need to be wanted by her mother and father before the state will take on its responsibilities? I shared with the committee this morning a video of a young man who survived an abortion in another country. His story is an inspiring one. He's missing limbs, but he participated in sports. To me, his missing limbs represent a part of our missing humanity, including the 60+ million lives that have been taken in our own country, but also a part of our own humanity. When we turn a blind eye to the neglect of those human beings, living human beings around us who are in need of protection and our care. With that, I would stand for any questions, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lehman. Questions for Mr. Lehman? Seeing none, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Next is Marcy Kindred. Marcy Kindred? Dr. Hinkle is on our list later on, so yes, that would be fine.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Welcome
Hello.
to the Ag Committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman and committee. My name is Dr. Renee Hinkle. I'm an OBGYN physician here in Cheyenne for 24 years. I will be short and brief. I very much oppose this bill, as I'm sure most of you are aware. One of the main concerns I have is that it does say that abortion is not healthcare. Abortion is healthcare. It's been determined by the American College of OBGYN. It's been determined by the World Health Organization. It's been determined by the United Nations. And for Wyoming to suddenly declare that it's not healthcare, in my opinion, is not necessarily appropriate. And I'm not sure, you're not medical people for the most part. And I think that taking the expertise of people across the world is a little bit more appropriate in that determination. The other thing I would say in response to Mr. Winnie's statement about abortion, about ectopic pregnancies probably not being viable. Ectopic pregnancies are never viable. It's not something that can happen. So
Go ahead,
If
Senator
I
Hicks.
may, it's not appropriate to rebuttal somebody else's
Okay.
testimony. You're here to take testimony on the bill, not rebuttal what other witnesses have said. So, and it just is a redirect, just focus on the bill. And this is for everybody else in the audience. This is not about rebuttaling rebuttaling what one of the other people testified. So if we could just stay focused, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. And just for your information, ectopic pregnancy is addressed in the bill. So,
Yes, I understand
right.
it is.
All right. All right. Any further comments?
No, thank you.
All right. Thank you for being with us today. Next up, Susan Graham. Susan Graham. Susan Graham is not here. Steve Malia. Steve Malia, then. We'll skip to the next. Thank you for being with us today. Go right ahead.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Steve Milia, resident of Cheyenne. Background is public health educator, various aspects for the last 30 years, some with Wyoming Department of Health. I am in favor of this bill. I like to say that this is not a sexist bill, and if something like this happened to men, it has happened to men. It's called the military draft. My brother was drafted. He was taken out of his home, sent over to Vietnam for 2 years. A high school friend, he was taken out and he's sent over, he's dead. That was pretty traumatic. So life is important. We all have our responsibilities. Women have their responsibilities. Men have their responsibilities, and we must live up to those responsibilities. Pregnancy is just not a women's subject. They can only get pregnant by a man. And we talk about reproductive health. Well, what are women and men reproducing if not a human being? The ovum and the sperm are human in origin, one man, one woman. And if they are not producing or reproducing a live human being, well, then what are they reproducing? And the fetus is sometimes thrown out there as a word that means it's Latin for baby, and it's not a euphemism for an inanimate object which can be disposed of. If we don't, every one of us came from that sperm and ovum from our parents. They considered us alive. We are given prenatal care. Men must step up and support any and every woman that they get pregnant, and we must make sure that we defend life. So abortion is not health care, it is health denying care. And I stand for questions, and I would ask for your vote of a yes on this bill.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions? Any questions? Seeing none. Next would be up Jen Solis, if I said that correctly. Welcome, Jen. Say that again.
Solis.
Solis.
Thanks very much.
All right, welcome. State your name and who you're with today, and give us your testimony on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jen Solis. I stand in opposition to this bill. I also believe that abortion is healthcare, and I sit before you as evidence of that. I was pregnant 7 times in the course of my reproductive life. 4 of those ended in miscarriages, and 3 of those required medical interventions. 2 surgical abortions, often called DNCs, and 1 chemical abortion. These were all pregnancies that I very much intended to keep, that my husband and I very much wanted. However, that's not how it worked out. And I needed medical intervention. I am very concerned that the legislature is making decisions on behalf of women who just need medical care. Now, my belief is that I did not lose a baby. I did not lose a life. I did not have death inside of me. Now, someone else may believe differently, and that is their right. I love that for them. I will support a woman however she needs to grieve her pregnancy loss. But my belief is that I did not lose life. I lost a pregnancy. And those pregnancy losses required me to get medical interventions. And I'm very concerned that our state is getting involved in these decisions. They're very personal. Our state constitution protects our right to make medical decisions. And I do believe that this bill infringes upon that. And I believe it will be overturned ultimately in the courts if you do proceed with it. Thank you. I stand for any questions.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Solis. Any questions? Any questions? Seeing none. Next up is Gary Brown. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. For me, this is very personal.
Could you state your name and who you're with, where you're from, please?
I'm sorry, my name is
Before you
Gary
start.
Brown. I'm
Okay, thank you.
a resident of Cheyenne. So when I was 30 years old, my second wife came to me and told me she was pregnant and that she was going to get an abortion. At that time, I was pretty naive about Roe versus Wade, so I went to an attorney, which basically laughed at me and told me there was nothing I could do about it. I left her because of that. She came and found me, asked me to come back, told me she would never do that again. A few months later, that's exactly what she did. She got pregnant again, and she aborted my second child. This has been 40 years ago. My children were denied me. People say this is about the woman. This is about three people. This is about fathers, mothers, and a child. And with our science, or medical science has advanced to the point now that we know that these children, when they're conceived, they have their own DNA. That's a separate person. The Supreme Court, by overturning Roe versus Wade, has given this back to you. It is the legislature's place to do. This is not just about the doctors and the women. This is about everybody. But it's also been given back to the legislature to decide this for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any questions for Mr. Brown? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next up is Marcy Kindred. Welcome, Marcy.
Thank you, Madam Chair,
You're welcome.
committee. My name is Marcy Kindred. I'm a voter here in Cheyenne. I'm here to urge you to vote no on this bill. I know there are very strong feelings on both sides of this bill. There always are when it comes to matters of belief. The core argument around this debate is always a matter of belief, the belief of when a life begins. When it comes down to that, that belief varies from person to person, from religion to religion. The only way to respect all of those beliefs is by maintaining access to abortion care. Nobody's going to force you to get an abortion. You can choose not to. This bill defines life beginning at conception. And personally, you are free to teach and preach whatever you choose in your home and at the pulpit. I support everybody's right to do so. I'd show up here at 7:30 to support your right to do so. But I believe, as someone who attends church on every Sunday, as someone who has experienced the miracle of pregnancy and brought 4 humans into this world, I believe personally, spiritually, that a life does not begin at conception. I believe it is much more nuanced than that. And that belief is between me and my God. As a proud American that believes in that the freedom of religion is sacred, you are welcome to disagree. I respect your beliefs. You're welcome to pray for me, and I'll be praying for you. As a Wyomingite, I would implore you to dig deep into our state's values of individual liberties and freedom. And please do not infringe on my beliefs. I would love to work hand in hand with you on legislation that will actually support families, legislation that will reduce the need for pregnant people to seek abortions for lack of support and resources. You actually have the opportunity to do so, to support Wyoming mothers today. I hope all of our pro-life senators will prove their dedication to Wyoming babies and with a vote for HB 4 later today. But that is absolutely a better use of our time for folks on both sides of this issue. Let's work together to reduce the need for abortions because of lack of access, because of lack of support. Thank you. I'd stand for any questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kindred. Senator French.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thanks for your testimony. Very well articulated. You said you didn't believe life started at conception, I believe is what you said. When do you believe life begins then?
So, Chairman Steinmetz, Senator.
Yeah.
I believe personally, can I ask for clarification? Personally, I tend to agree with the Jewish belief of life at first breath. That would be because pregnancies are so complicated, so complex. Women faced with incredibly difficult decisions need to have that room for varying beliefs to make these decisions. And so I do tend to lean towards the belief of our Jewish brothers and sisters that believe that life begins at first breath. Can I?
Well, I think we better keep going. You've kind of answered that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much
Madam
for being,
Chairman,
go ahead.
I have one
Senator
quick
Hicks.
question, Marcy, and thank you for your testimony today. And so, under existing Wyoming criminal law, if somebody, drunken driver, reckless driver, whatever, kills a pregnant woman, they're also liable for the taking of 2 lives. Would you support repealing that provision in state law, that if somebody that was drunk driver, vehicular homicide, intentionally kills a pregnant woman, right now they can be convicted for 2 counts of murder? Would you support repealing that law to not recognize that they took 2 lives?
Go ahead.
I'm not sure how. That's not something that I've given a lot of thought to, I'll be honest. Our legislature made a decision. I think in a devastating case such as the loss of life in an accident such as that, I don't think it's something that I would necessarily think a lot of time should be spent trying to repeal that necessarily. I respect that law is on the books, that is how it is interpreted. I think that would be probably not a good use of our time to try and do, but sure, with my belief that life begins at first breath, that's not a law that I feel really particularly.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Senator Hicks.
All right. Thank you for coming out today in the cold. All right. Next up, Nathan Winters. Welcome to the Ag Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Committee. My name is Nathan Winters, President of the Wyoming Family Alliance. And as you have just heard, sometimes we hear the argument that the right to life is merely a religious perspective, and I just want to rise in opposition to that argument. The right to life is so foundational, it is a truth that's been deemed self-evident, and those who uphold life have demonstrated scientifically that the unborn child meets all the definitions of life. For instance, a zygote, this is by Dr. Keith Moore in Developing Humans, Clinically Oriented Embryology. A zygote is the beginning of a new human life. That's in the 7th edition, published in 2003. In Langman's Medical Embryology Journal, it says this: development begins with fertilization, the process of which a male gamete, the sperm, and the female gamete, the oocyte, unite and give rise to a zygote. The overarching contention for some is this. They ask whether it's truly healthcare. In considering whether abortion is healthcare, we have to consider whether prenatal care involves 1 patient or 2. That's where the rub is. And most would contend that pregnancy is not a disease from which one must be cured. Rather, prenatal care involves at least 2 patients, a mother and an unborn baby. And the object of prenatal care is to serve both of those patients, maximizing the unborn baby's chances of a healthy delivery while protecting the mother's life. The object of prenatal care is to protect mothers and babies at the same time. Therefore, abortion cannot be health care. It intentionally removes the life of one of those patients. It is the antithesis of health care. And this legislation is the foundational purpose of government. It defends the right of everyone to live. Most pro-abortionists over time recognize that they've lost the factual battle. For instance, former president of Planned Parenthood, Faye Waddleton, once said this: I think we have deluded ourselves into believing that people don't know that abortion is killing. So any pretense that abortion is not killing is a signal of our ambivalence, a signal that if we cannot say yes, it kills a fetus. Anne Furedi, head of England's largest chain of abortion providers, said this: "We can accept that the embryo is a living thing in the fact that it has a beating heart. It has its own genetic system within it. It is clearly human in the sense that it's not a gerbil, and we can recognize that it is a human life."
Right.
And
Mr. Winters, we appreciate you being here today.
Very
Your
good.
2 minutes are up.
oh, thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Winters today? Any
All right.
questions? Thank you for
Thank
being
you,
with us.
guys.
We appreciate it. All right. I see Senator Hutchings came in. Senator Hutchings, would you like to testify on this bill? Thank you for being with us.
Certainly would like to just make a quick comment. It will just probably take less than 30 seconds. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I actually had to ask someone what bill we were dealing with when I came in. And if I recall, this is a bill about life. So going back to our Declaration of Independence, where we talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it states very clearly that you, as our legislative body, the government, are, to secure the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are the main reasons why government was instituted. That's my comment, and I sit for questions.
Thank you, Senator Hutchings. Any questions for Senator Hutchings? All right. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Forget to say I'm on and for this bill.
All
Appreciate
right,
that.
thank you so much. All right, we'll go, we have time, we have 6 minutes for people on Zoom. We'll start with the ones in, one in opposition. Christine Lichtenfels, I think might be how you say that name. Here, could we admit Christine, please? All right. Good morning, Christine. Thank you for being with us. Please state your name and who you're with. And we only have we don't have many minutes. We have 6 minutes left. So as brief as you could be, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and other senators. My name's Christine Lichtenfels and I'm from Lander, Wyoming. And I ask you to vote no. This bill is unconstitutional in numerous respects. It invites litigation and perhaps most importantly goes counter to Wyoming's foundational values of privacy, freedom from overbearing governmental interference in private matters, and even basic principles of contract, consent, and responsibility for one's decisions and actions. Really short, while this bill claims to be about equality, its effect is the opposite. Women are stripped of their ability to make decisions about their own bodies and futures. Not only that, in 35-6-127, women are treated as children, incapable of giving and being responsible for consent they provide doctors to perform the abortion. Rather, the bill provides for them to renege on their consent and sue a doctor for having taken an action the woman herself requested. Second, the bill violates federal Medicaid requirements by not providing rape and incest exceptions. This could jeopardize Medicaid funding for all eligible Wyoming residents. Additionally, the bill violates Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, 42 U.S.C. 1395 DD, which requires that if a person with an emergency medical condition seeks treatment at an emergency department, the hospital must provide medical treatment necessary to stabilize the condition. This includes serious dysfunction of any bodily organ or part, not just a major body. As you may know, Department of Justice has obtained a preliminary injunction in Idaho to ensure that emergency medical conditions would be properly treated. Simply put, this bill tramples on Wyoming values of personal responsibility and of freedom from unnecessary and plainly wrong governmental overreach, and it invites litigation. And this is not the Wyoming we all love and cherish. Please vote no. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Christine. Any questions for Christine? Seeing none, thank you for being with us today. Next up, in favor of the bill, Scott Brown. Scott, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Committee. Yes, we can hear you. Right ahead.
Scott Brown, Bighorn County. I stand in favor of this bill. There's I echo all of the previous positions that have been taken in favor of this bill. There's one point that has not been made that I've heard in all the debates thus far in the 2023 legislature regarding life, and that's this. The nation of Israel anciently was cursed numerous times and punished for not upholding God's law. And my question that I would pose to all of us is, how can God bless a state that is allowing their unborn children to be killed? And so I believe that even if the passage of this bill saves only one life, the state of Wyoming and the people of Wyoming will be blessed for that life that is saved. And that is the extent of my testimony. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. Any questions for Mr. Brown? Seeing none, next up, Katie Noyes, I think is how you might say it. Katie, are you in the waiting room?
I am, Madam Chair.
We can hear you. Welcome to the Ag Committee. Go right ahead with your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Katie Noyes. I am a family doctor and I've practiced medicine in Wyoming for over 10 years. I'll be brief. First of all, if our goal here is to reduce or eliminate abortions, this is not a useful path. If you study reproductive health care, abortion bans do not prevent abortion. They simply drive them underground or to other locations, and in some cases in unsafe manners. Abortion rates fall in areas where it is broadly legal. Also, women seek abortions regardless of legal status. I fear that Wyoming citizens will end up simply traveling to other states, spending more money, losing work, struggling with childcare, and in many cases, self-managing their own abortions if this bill were to pass. Overall, I just think these bills, this one in particular, as well as some of the other anti-choice bills, have just shown how hostile of an environment Wyoming has become to women, to families, to providers as well. I don't think young people fresh out of college, professionals, providers will come to choose to this state if Wyoming continues to pass hostile legislation to women's health and women's choice. That is the end of my testimony. I urge you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Any questions? Thank you for being with us today. We appreciate your testimony. With that, it is 9 o'clock, and unfortunately, we will not be able to take the rest of the testimony online in order to give us time to work the bill. Thank you all for being with us today. We appreciate it. Public testimony is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure on the bill?
Second.
Moved by Kolb, seconded by French. And I'll ask the sponsors to come back up. We will, and also our good President of the Senate has also got an amendment for us today. I think first we will have him pass that out. And committee, before we amend the bill, we'll ask the president to explain his amendment. Thank you for being with us today, Mr. President. Welcome to the Ag Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I'll be pretty brief on it. You've got a lot of work in front of you. First, I'd like to thank the two sponsors sitting next to me for reaching out and working with me. I think it's a pretty classic way of what you deal with bills, and I appreciate their efforts with me. I've read a pretty simple amendment on the thing, and it's long and short of it. We're going to try to do what we've done in the past on several other of these bills that have gone through, makes it align. This is adds in the bill to where the life of the mother, you can actually perform an abortion if there's life at risk. This adds a section below that says perform an abortion on a woman when a pregnancy is a result of incest is designed by 64202, or sexual assault is defined by Wyoming statute 62301. Prior to the performance of any abortion in this paragraph, the woman's parent or guardian, if the woman is a minor or subject to guardianship, shall report the act of incest or sexual assault to a law enforcement agency, and a copy of the report should be provided to the physician. Pretty simple. It's just a rape and incest exception into it. I'd ask that you adopt this into the bill. I think it probably aligns closer to what a majority of the people do. But with that, I'd stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any questions? Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Any comments from the sponsors on this amendment? No comments from the sponsors. Do I have a motion to
Madam
move?
Chairman, I'll move the amendment.
Moved by Hicks, seconded by Cole. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Discussion on the amendment? Seeing
Question.
none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
The amendment has passed. Thank you, Mr. President. Any further amendments by the committee? I do have one when we get to that point, but if someone else has one first, I would be glad to. And maybe I will do this one first. I will go ahead and move the amendment we have passed out, and I think if you do have a copy of that amendment, okay. So basically what it would do, this amendment, on page 2, lines 12 through 15, excuse me, it deletes that first legislative finding. On page 3, lines 4 through 7, it deletes that finding. On page 3, lines 14 through 18, it deletes that finding. On page 4, lines 14, let's see, 4, lines 14 and 15 delete entirely. And then on page 7, lines 17 through 21 is a delete entirely. And on page 19, lines 4 through 16 delete entirely. Did everyone follow along with that? And Senator Ide, welcome back. We'll get you caught up momentarily. So, so basically that deletes the amendment that the good sponsors were concerned with in the bill, known as the Crago Amendment, and also cleans up some of the legislative findings. Are there any comments from the sponsors on that amendment? All right, seeing none, I would move that amendment. Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved by Steinmetz, seconded by French. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. So we have 2 amendments. Are there any further amendments to the bill?
Madam Chairman.
Senator Hicks.
So this is going to have to read, so we go on to page 13 on subsection B. Go to line 5. So it'll, after the word law, strike everything else in that section.
Okay.
And then I'm going to consolidate and bring in some new language. So after law, it will say, let me see if I can track this in. A member or a member of the legislature who sponsored or co-sponsored this act
Okay.
We're caught up, Linda? After law, yep. So it will now read, a member or members of the legislature who sponsored or co-sponsored this act shall have standing to defend this act as an intervener in any case in which the constitutionality of this act or any portion thereof is challenged in a court of competent jurisdiction.
Did you get that, Linda? All right. All right. Did everyone get that, or do we need it read back? All right, go ahead, Senator French.
Madam Chair, yes, could it be read back?
Could you
I
please
couldn't
read
write
that
fast.
again?
I'll have to make sure that. the
Linda, could you read that
secretary-
back to us, please?
Okay, on page 13, line 5, after law, a member or members of the legislation who sponsor or co-sponsor this act shall have standing to defend this act as an intervener in any case in which the constitutionality of the act or any portion thereof is challenged in a court of competent jurisdiction.
All right.
Yeah,
Did everyone
just,
get that?
I think you said legislation, but it would be of the legislature. So a member or members of the legislature.
Okay.
All right. All right. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, I'll go to the co-sponsors. Any comments on the amendments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill? Any further amendments? All right, we'll go to discussion on the bill. Any discussion on the bill? Senator Cole.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just want to say that this has been given to the state legislative body by the Supreme Court as a choice. And I think we exercise that choice today by how we vote. And it's important that we represent the people, what we believe their intentions would be if they were here. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cole. Any further comments? Further comments? Seeing none, Linda, would you call the roll?
Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Hicks.
Aye.
Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator Kolb.
Aye.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
Chairman Steinmetz, there are 5 ayes and no noes.
Thank you, Linda. The bill has passed. Thank you, sponsors. We appreciate you, everyone being here today and coming out
Thank
on
you,
this
Senators.
cold day. So,
Thank you,
all
Chairman
right.
and committee.
All right, thank you. With that, that's our final bill for this meeting. The meeting is adjourned.